Hey everybody, my name is Jonathan Core, and in today's marketing talk, I'm going to be talking to the VP of Global Marketing for a cloud-based point solution company called RFPio. My guest today, Angela Earl, has been in the marketing field for over 14 years now and has had an outstanding career holding several key roles in different companies. Angela is also the founder of the High Bar Media and the host of MarTalk, a podcast for marketing professionals. Thanks for hopping on this call, Angela.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, let's kick this off. Obviously, I was giving you some background and context, on why I started this podcast initially, and given the global pandemic, it's obviously affected everybody across the whole globe. I'm curious, from a high level view, how has it affected you, your team, and your company, and how have you guys adapted, if so, if needed, during this global pandemic?
Sure. Yeah, great question. I think it's affected many of us in many different ways. Us specifically, though, um, RFPIO has been very lucky. I wouldn't say we're pandemic proof by any means, but the reaction that we have had to have is really one of embracing change and spontaneity. We have had to keep an eye on things closer than we've ever had to keep an eye on things, and adapt and adjust and pivot throughout the whole journey, day by day, week by week.
And specifically for RFPIO, just unpacking that a little bit, are you guys a 100% remote company, or do you guys actually have a headquarters and an actual office before the pandemic?
We have a headquarters and an office internationally, and we're big on in-person collaboration. So we were not at all a remote company, I would say, and we have adapted. We are all now working remote and doing so beautifully.
That's great to hear. And so I have one just final question, just picking or kind of unpacking that a little bit, because I have seen other people share on LinkedIn, share online. I've been working ever since I started working from home. I've actually been working more hours. And so I'm curious, has that been true for you, or have you been able to really identify how to have that, kind of, work and home balance? I know it's harder when you are working from home, but what has been your experience so far?
Yeah, as a leader, I've had to keep a close eye on it. I will say, I ran an agency completely remote for 3 years. So for me personally, it felt very familiar, but I was also familiar with the sitting in the same place for 10 hours a day and how exhausting physically and emotionally that can become. So from the start of the remote, we were sensitive to it, encouraging the team to get out, go for walks at lunchtime, encouraging, time off from the very beginning. Our company gave employees an extra day off just to, again, encourage that balance and that, rest.
That's really encouraging to hear, especially from a leadership standpoint. I'm sure the having both experience working in the office at home, I'm sure probably made it, if not easier, but probably easier on your team to be able to make that transition just from an experiential standpoint. So normally I ask my guests to really give me like a quick synopsis of their career. Your career had there was a lot of significant moments in your career,
Yeah.
which is honestly, like, through my research, I'm like, wow. Like, if I were to just read this on a single page, I'm like, one person did all this, was able to achieve all this. So great job to you, Angela. But my question initially is, you first started off as more assistant roles, and then eventually, transitioned into more executive assistant roles, more in the financial and medical sectors. How
Sure.
did you eventually like branch or like land in marketing in around 2006?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting career when you look at it as a whole, right? My career actually started in title and escrow, if you can believe that. So, one of my first professional jobs was I got because my aunt worked in an escrow company, and she got me hired to do some of the filing, moved my way up the ladder to an escrow assistant back when we had actual files and were faxing things between teams. And I think, when I think of marketing, and I might be making this too much of a marketing journey, but honestly, I look back and I think even then I was aware of um, the marketing efforts, unofficially, that were going on, the need for a brand promise in an escrow company when people have choices and things like that. It didn't materialize in my own career. As you said, I went the executive assistant route, got some really great experience working for some really wonderful people and companies along the way. And then somewhere, in the executive assistant journey, I think it was at Tripwire. I was working alongside sales and marketing a lot in my role. I supported the founder of Tripwire and our head of professional services, and so I just sat in a really unique seat. I got to see what both of those roles look like. Originally, I thought I wanted to go into sales, and had some good friends that let me listen in to a second set of headphones to some of their calls, and didn't think I could handle that much rejection in a day. And so I chose the marketing route.
That's awesome. No, yeah, I've also have not as extensive, but some experience in sales, doing retail and cold calling, and yeah, especially for an introvert, it's not my bread and butter. I can't, I can't do that. I can't do it as effectively as I've seen other people do it. So now you're currently the VP of Global Marketing at RFPio. I'm curious, going back to the executive assistant experience and being an executive assistant, you're in those meetings with those executives, basically kind of like taking down all the keynotes, calendaring, all these aspects for these executives. If you were to reflect back on being an executive assistant, do you think that has allowed for you to be a better executive in different roles today? And if so, how?
Yeah, that time radically shaped me, and I credit it to a lot of my success, to be honest. I think when you are able to keep yourself organized and multiple other people organized at an executive level, you learn project management at much deeper than a lot of people have the good fortune of doing. It also got me very comfortable being around the executive suite, which is something that I've been grateful for as I've had my own journey in my own career. I was never uncomfortable speaking up. I never, got squirmy because our CEO was in the room. There was just a normalcy to it. As an executive, I'm very conscious. I saw it done well and I saw it done poorly. So, try to be approachable, try and be relatable, try and know what's going on, and not get too lost in my own day to day, to not check in with the team, and never be afraid to roll up my own sleeves.
So, what practical advice would you give to a marketer within a team that don't find themselves in that executive role or in the C-suite, that you would encourage them to develop or be conscious of when communicating with C-level executives?
Yeah, I don't know that it's anything you shouldn't be conscious of with other people. I think things like being respectful of time. We all have a finite amount of time, and so if you're going to take someone's time, have purpose for it. Those are things that, yes, us executives are sensitive to because we have far more demands on our time, being that we usually have entire orgs that are reporting up to us. But it's something I think that matters peer to peer too.
Yeah, that's actually really good. I'm glad you mentioned that. It's just be yourself, but also be respectful of people's time and attention resources. Okay, so eventually in your career, you pivoted more towards tech, specifically, and obviously you're in a tech company now. And this is honestly my own personal curiosity. I'm fascinated with tech. So how did that transition happen, and or the first opportunity to go within a marketing role within tech?
How did that happen? The first time was Tripwire, and it was happenstance. I didn't seek out a tech company necessarily. I was relatively new to Portland, um, and the role seemed to be a really good fit. It was an executive assistant role, working for a founder, something I knew how to do well. It was in a new space, having been in finance for a longer period of time, so I was intrigued by the newness of it. So it's going back, 14 years, as you pointed out. So tech was in a little bit different space in Portland at that time. And so I was attracted to just the energy and the growth potential and everything else that came with it. And then I
And
was hooked, obviously.
and would you say it was as fast paced or more or less than it is now back then?
uh, it was now, it's different, right? So in many ways, tech has become a part of our everyday, at least in mine. It's the world I live and breathe. But there are still pockets of growth, and I think that's one of the things I loved about RFPIO that drew me back from the agency side, was that the response world, the RFP management world, didn't accelerate as fast as other sectors of sales technology. And so the fact that they were still in that rapid growth stage sounded really fun and a little nostalgic.
So pretty much at this point, like, and I wish we could unpack every season of your career, but obviously for sake of time, we want to be respectful of you and also the listeners as well. But you've pretty much held every single position in marketing that one can have, from a marketing specialist, a manager, senior manager, director, operations, agency founder, CRO, and now VP of global marketing. If you were to reflect on the overall just span of your career, what would, and I know you mentioned, being an executive assistant really helped you, was really monumental in the foundation of your career. What are some of the other outliers that you've seen or noticed, if you were to reflect on your career, that have allowed for you to grow just over time, specifically within marketing and even in different market sectors?
Yeah, the switch from tech to agency, I would say, is the second most impactful. Understanding client service, having to answer to demanding clients, having to stay within scope and be aware of, level of effort that was going into each project. I think now that I'm back at tech, one of the bonuses of having spent time agency side is that I'm aware of what's going on in a different way than I would have been if I had just stayed client side.
So do you, so now being at RFPio, within an agency realm, you're working with several different clients. Do you think that has allowed for you to kind of pick, and see different trends now being the VP at RFPIO that maybe you didn't have prior to the agency experience?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I can relate what we're doing into different experiences that I was lucky enough to have agency side. Also keenly aware of all the communication that has to happen inside of my own company, in the same way that communicating with clients and different stakeholders is important in an agency. We have sales, we have customer success, we have different product teams that all need to be communicated about what's going on in marketing, and hopefully we do a better job at that.
Yeah, and with your agency experience, I mentioned it. Actually, I don't think I mentioned it. Maybe it's just in my mind. But basically, so eventually, your agency was acquired by, I think you pronounce it Obility. I think that's how you
It's
pronounce
true.
it.
Yep.
What was that experience like? What was it like to have your agency acquired by another agency?
Yeah, unexpected would be the one word if I had to pick one, and fun. It was a great journey. Hatsama grew rapidly over 3 years, humbled by that experience. It was just phenomenal. Worked with tons of friends, made tons of friends along the way. And one of those friends was Mike, and we got to talking. Was not about an acquisition. We actually met for coffee to maybe do some referral business between each other. That coffee ended up being a long coffee and many coffees thereafter that eventually turned into him acquiring Hatsama and me joining the Ability team.
So that partnership piece, that's really interesting to me right now. Did you go after a lot of like business development opportunities with other agencies as you were growing your agency, or was Mike one of the few that you connected with from an agency level?
He was one of the few. It was coming off of the coattails of realizing I needed to be more focused. So we had grown so fast over the course of the 3 years, with a lot of requests coming in from customers, and we were doing our best to meet just the requests as they would come in. And we were to the growth point where we needed to start learning to say no. And I was, you know, rather than saying no, you want to have someone to refer them to that you can trust, that's going to take care of them the way that we had. And he was one of the first I reached out to, oddly enough.
That's awesome. And I actually saw Ability. So they're specifically focused on B2B tech companies. Was your agency specifically focused on tech
It
only?
was. It was, yeah.
Wow.
Been I got caught hook, line, and sinker, you could say, from my first taste of tech.
That's awesome. So, from a practical standpoint, what are two or three tips that you would give to agency founders or agency owners right now? There's a lot of agencies in the area I live in, Seattle, but obviously in Portland and just across the world. What are maybe two or three tips of advice that you would give to agency founders?
Counter. That's hard in the wake of the pandemic. I'm sure things have changed since I was in an agency. Take care of your people. I think the best agencies out there know that their talent is their offering, and the more taking care of your team feels, that loyalty is reciprocated tenfold.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good, and that's actually one of the things I've actually seen across. I've had conversations with different agency owners, and that's the biggest thing is taking care of your people and also recruiting the best people. So I think that's
Yeah.
great advice there. So you've also had experience in volunteer roles, for it's the Technology Association of Oregon, besides Las Vegas. I saw one specific role that was a volunteer role. So I'm curious, how has that contributed just overall in your marketing career? In those kind of unpaid experience, but being involved in other things that may expand networking and other opportunities.
Yeah. Going back to your ask about the executive, I think our time is a precious thing that we have, a commodity that when given in philanthropic ways, is just a gift, and it's something that I've been the recipient of, and so it's something I try and give back constantly. I'm usually volunteering at least one organization. Um, what going back over my career, most of the companies I've worked at, I've either started or been heavily involved in community service in those organizations. So it's something that I just sort of a core value of mine, I suppose.
That's a great core value to have. So that's awesome to hear. Just curious question. So, right. So do you have a team, like a team under you? I'm assuming right now with RFPIO.
We do. Our marketing team, I think we're at 17. So we're a bigger marketing team for the size of company we are.
That's awesome. So, these last two questions really have to, unpack more for, I would say for these times, during the pandemic, the global pandemic that's going on, from a leadership standpoint, what are some of the skills or characteristics that, allow for a marketer to be essential within a company, especially during these trying times? I know that sometimes, some companies, like there's phenomenal marketers who are unfortunately laid off, but for to set that aside, like, what are some of these skills or characteristics that marketers should be developing to, be essential, but then also grow within their role?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the most essential skills for any department right now is empathy, honestly. It has nothing to do with marketing at all and everything to do with it all at the same time. The more we can understand what our buyers are going through, the more we can understand what our peers are going through. I think the more relatable content we can create, the more relatable experiences we can do. We just, get to a place of, relationship.
And that's interesting that you say that. I've obviously have had several conversations with different marketers, and it really goes back to what you're saying. It's less about the technical skills, because anybody can develop the technical skills. There's a lot of aspects that you can get, but it's some of those being empathetic, being integrous, being respectful. All these aspects that you can't really, like, I'm sure you can train somebody, but it's something that they have to want, and like
Yeah.
truly in themselves. So that's really insightful, that piece. So you've been in marketing now for, over 14 years. If you were to look at Angela back when she was an executive assistant,
Sit up
14,
straight. No.
14 years ago, what advice would you tell her, based off of everything you've experienced and know today?
Yeah. Not to be redundant, but I would repeat the empathy thing. That was something I learned along the way. I was taught to work hard, and I've had, sort of a very focused, intense, driven mentality about me since I was very young. And that wasn't always delivered with love and kindness, right? There was some hurt feelings definitely along the way, would be my biggest regrets, that my young self often let the ego get the best of me. Going after the goal, I didn't realize there were people involved until later on in life.
Wisdom right there. I love it. So now I'm going to transition into the last part of this conversation, which is the rapid fire questions. The first question I have for you specifically is, what's your favorite marketing tool or software that isn't RFPIO currently?
Yeah, thank you for the boundaries on that one. I actually, you sent this question to me ahead of time, and I tried to prepare an answer. As someone who came up through the ranks of ops in marketing, that's a hard question. I'm a believer that there's a tool for every problem and a problem for every tool. So picking a favorite was difficult. For our team, and also at the last two agencies I was at, we used Wrike heavily to manage our projects, and I think organization and project management are so critical. both, agency side and in a company. So I'd have to go with Wrike. We'll give them a little plug.
Can you spell it real quick? Just so, how do you spell Reich?
Yeah, Wrike.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes below. So the second question is, what is your favorite marketing online course that you've taken up to this point? Or yeah, what's your favorite online marketing course?
Yeah, there's a great course. I can't remember the exact name of it. Ann Handley recently taught a course on storytelling, just going back to kind of marketing fundamentals, right? I think the better marketers know how to tell good stories, and stories are what capture people's attention. So, big fan.
Great. And now, what is your favorite business or marketing book that you've read up to this point?
Yeah, I actually have a prop for you on that one. Um, First, break all the
Yep.
rules, definitely.
Yep.
um, That and I would say the growth mindset, which isn't a marketing book, but also really key.
Growth Mindset. Who is that by?
Carol Dweck, I think, is the author on that one.
Awesome. There you go. That first one is a solid book. I've read that one myself, but I haven't read the second one, so I'll check that out. And last is, who is your favorite marketer? Either someone you've known working throughout your career, or somebody you've admired from afar.
There are lots. I follow lots of folks. Big fan of Scott Vaughn's at Integrate. Also mentioned Ann Handley already. Big Ann Handley fan. Both, I've met Scott. I know Scott. I have met Ann once, probably more from afar. She spoke at our conference last year. Also a Gary Vaynerchuk fan. Just the edgy, sort of raw, unfilteredness of it. It's definitely something to follow.
Three solid people there. So now, if people are interested in learning more about you and what you do, what platforms can they connect or touch base with you on?
Yeah, the easiest probably LinkedIn to reach me on. That's I'm monitoring that pretty regularly. It's where I get most of my content for my own reading and consumption outside of books. Also available on Twitter.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Angela, for hopping on this podcast. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, experience, some resources with the marketing community. It's very much needed, and I really appreciate you taking the time today.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
And please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe this podcast to receive more great content, just like my conversation with Angela today.